Happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope that you're feeling creative and inspired and healthy. I'm feeling rejuvenated this week and healthy. I don't know exactly why. Well, I guess I know some of the reasons. I just got done with this 9-day juice cleanse, and so I'm feeling healthier and slimmer than I've been in a few months. I don't know, maybe a year. And so I've been working out, and because my legs been getting better, my knees feeling better, I've been working out more than I have in a long time. I was able to do yoga for the first time this week, for the first time in a couple months, so that feels good. So I guess I'm coming back to myself a little bit more and more after my knee injury, which was on the 1st of June. And has really changed my life for the last 2 months. And so I'm starting to get back to my regular self. The other thing that's happening is my birthday is this week, and I get a couple days off work, which is always nice. And around my birthday, I'm sure everyone does this, but I'm always thinking about my life and reflecting on what I've done or haven't done in the last year, and getting inspired to try and do more in the coming years. One little writer's tradition that I have that I've been doing ever since I was 23 years old. I think 23 years old was the first one. I always write some kind of a birthday journal, which is just, when I was 23, I was writing them in actual journals, and I've since transcribed some of those into documents, into Word documents, or save them onto my computer so that I can keep them and have them even if I lose my journals one day or whatever happens to the physical copies. But every year I write just a kind of journal, just my thoughts, and then it's fun to go back and look at those from year to year, even just to see like where I was, not only how I was feeling, but like where in the world I was and what I was doing, and also what was important to me at the time and what I was thinking about. I wish I had started them earlier. It would have been amazing to be able to go all the way back to when I was a teenager, but better late than never. I had the first one when I was 23, and I think I have all of them since then saved. There might be a couple that I still need to transcribe. But anyways, so this morning I was looking back at a couple of those, and that exercise helped me, or it made me, put my life into perspective and think about what's important to me. So I guess it is the birthday week. And then also the just feeling better with my leg, getting more active. Feel like I'm starting to come back to myself a little bit, so that's a good feeling. And another thing I know is when I'm listening to music, that seems to be a good sign or a good marker. It's like something that the doctor would check up and tell you that your blood levels are where they should be. If I had a therapist, I would imagine that they could measure part of my well-being, on my emotional well-being, on how much music I'm listening to. Because if I'm just so busy or stressed out or just haggard from like regular life, then I don't listen to much music because there's no time for that, and I don't ever get in that mode of slowing down or reflecting. And then maybe if I do have a chance, then I'm, instead of listening to music, I'm listening to a podcast or trying to do something productive. But this morning when I went for a walk around the block, I just listened to songs, and that always makes me feel, I guess it puts me in a different state, similar to reading a book. When you listen to music that you like and that resonates with you, then it's sort of like looking into a pool of water or a mirror and having some of those images reflected back at you, and letting the music, I guess the music is showing you things about yourself or helping you feel things or projecting things or saying things in a way that you felt but you couldn't say them yourself. That's how I always feel when I read an amazing book or listen to an amazing song. When you hear the perfect line, then I always think, oh, that's what I know. I think that's what a good writer does, is they say things that resonate with people, where if we could have said those things, then we would have said them ourselves. But we've felt those feelings before. We've just never been able to articulate it that way. And that's definitely something that music does for us, at least for me. It helps articulate the way I'm feeling and what I'm caring about, what's important to me. It articulates those things in a way that I can't do just by talking to someone else, or even just by thinking my own thoughts. Music helps take it to another level of reality. That sounds a little wishy-washy, but yeah, articulate. Music helps say those things that you're feeling in a way that you can't yourself. And so, if I had a therapist, I imagine they could learn something about my well-being based on the amount of music that I'm listening to and consuming on a weekly basis. And I've been listening to more songs this week and downloading artists that I used to love that I haven't listened to in a long time. And maybe it's just the birthday week. I don't know, but I'm definitely feeling a little bit more like myself this week, and that's always good. The work on the novel is coming along. Last week on the podcast, I talked about stories that are self-aware that they are stories, and first-person narrators and third-person narrators. But I didn't talk about my own work, and I want to do that a little bit today, because that's what's on my mind, and that's a big part of this podcast, is what the inspiration that I'm using to try to push me further along with my own stories, and then overall the journey of trying to become not just a writer, but an author myself. So where am I along the process? What am I doing? Well, I'm still very early in the process and at the beginning of the stages. I haven't started on the first draft of the story yet, and that probably sounds ridiculous to you, but anyone who's written fantasy knows that a lot of world building and daydreaming goes into building a fantasy world before you can write your characters and write the story in that fantasy world. And some authors do it different ways. Some authors just pick a character and jump into the world and build it as they go. And then some authors who are bigger on the outlining process, like Brandon Sanderson, will spend days and weeks and months building out the world and thinking about all the different facets of their world, from the cultures to the language to the clothing to the food and the drink to the politics to the evil forces and the good forces and the magic systems and the economics and the geography. And as you can see, it's easy once you start the world building process to go down the rabbit hole and get lost and never come out, or never get to the point of actually writing the story. I'm not so much world building right now as I am outlining. I'm more working on the plot and the structure of my first novel. So I have a good general idea of what's going to happen in my first novel. But I realized something this week. I feel like I reached a kind of turning point, or at least I realized something that I think I was doing wrong, and I've been trying to correct that this week. So when you're struggling first time writer and wannabe author like I am, then sometimes those are the biggest victories, and the best things you can achieve is maybe you didn't make some huge success for that week, but maybe you realize something that you were doing wrong, and then that'll help you move forward. So the thing that I realized that I was doing wrong was I just didn't have any heart at the center of my outline, and I hadn't figured out enough about my protagonist, and I hadn't figured out exactly what my protagonist wanted and needed enough to finish the outline of the story. So I have the basic outline of the novel. I know where it's going to take place. I know roughly what's going to happen. I know who all the main characters are. I have a scattering of scenes I really like. But what I don't have is the ending of the story that's going to really, that pulls it all together, that helps me know from the beginning which direction I'm going. This is a lesson that I learned in one of my previous novels that I wrote, is that I can't really write the story unless I know the ending. And so I've been searching for that ending, and I've been making lists and going over all the different options and writing out different ideas, and I've been trying to find that ending that's going to tie everything together. And what I realized is that it's kind of a no-brainer thing, but now that I look back on it, but I was just going along with the outlining process and not realizing that I was doing this, and now it seems like a no-brainer thing. But my problem was that obviously I need to let the character decide what the ending is, and obviously I need to let my characters drive the story. And there's a lot of different writing adages about how if a writer does write by his characters, then they'll write the story for him. If a writer really listens to her characters, then she won't have to do as much outlining, because the characters will tell her where they want to go. And that's my problem with crafting my ending, was that I was trying to make something clever. I was trying to tie all the pieces of the stories together in a clever way that would put a bow on the novel and make it interesting. But what I need to do is just put my characters into that world and let them run wild and let them go where they really want to go. And so how I've changed my approach this week is I've stopped worrying about the outline or the events, the plot of the story so much, and I've been focusing a lot more on my main character. So I've started to develop and answer a lot more questions about him, what he's doing, where he's from, what his past is, most importantly, what he cares about, and why he has come to Tomorrow City. I feel like I'm close to being able to start the story. I'm really excited and anxious to just start the first draft writing process. I know that I've done it before, and it's a whirlwind once you start the first drafting, because you have to be on it every day. It's like when you commit to training for a race or starting a new diet. It just kind of consumes you every day, and you have to keep the ball rolling. It's this strange kind of process where it's really important that you keep momentum, because first drafting is so difficult, because you are creating something new every day. And it's hard because you just in our day-to-day lives, it's interesting to think about how when you're writing, one of the reasons writing's so difficult, especially in the early stages, is that you have to make so many decisions that you wouldn't otherwise make. So if you want your main character to be walking down the street and then to stop at a baker's cart and buy a loaf of bread, well, suddenly you have to imagine what exactly does the baker's cart look like, and you have to describe it in detail, and you have to describe the server or the baker or whoever gives the bread to the protagonist, and then you go down this rabbit hole of thinking, well, who is the server and what exactly do they look like and what is their past and are they having a good day or a bad day? And there are all these decisions that you have to make, whereas you don't, in our day-to-day lives, we don't actually have to make that many decisions. And that's why habits are important, and that's why routines are helpful. Because if every day you woke up and you had to decide, I'm trying to think of funny examples. Like if I woke up every day and I had to decide well, these are kind of absurd examples, but it's true for writing. I don't wake up every day and have to decide where in the world I live, who my spouse is, who my friends are, what I look like. I already basically know what I'm going to eat and drink because it's similar to what I have been eating and drinking for all the previous days. I don't have to figure out what my job is. I just go to it. I don't have to figure out what I'm going to wear. I just pick something that's already in the closet. So I don't know. This sounds silly, but I think it's fascinating that act of creation is difficult because you have to make so many decisions. And in our everyday lives, we try to limit that stuff as much as we can because it's hard, because you don't want to have to make choices every time. Even simple things can be frustrating when you're with your family and you're trying to decide where you're going to go out to eat. And then some of the family members argue, especially if you have kids or you remember being a kid with your siblings, you argue about who wants to go eat where. So even a simple daily decision like that, where we're going to go out to eat, can be really difficult and stressful, and it holds you up. That's what's annoying about it, is it kind of stops life in its tracks because you can't go eat until you make a decision about what you're going to eat. And that's why the act of creating, and especially first drafting, is so kind of stressful because you just want to write your character getting a loaf of bread, but then you have to make all these decisions as you write it. And as a add-on to that, that's why it's fun, and that's why writers write in trilogies and series a lot, especially fantasy writers, because imagine you do all the work of building this world, like all those things I listed off, the geography, the languages, the culture, all that shit, and then what, are you just gonna finish that novel and leave that world behind? No, it's like this huge investment of time and energy that you've made to create that world. And so it makes so much sense just to write another story in that world, to choose another character or to keep the same character and to keep writing them progressing along in that world. And then it's you can focus more on the characters and you don't have to answer those questions as much because you've already answered a lot of them. You already know what language your characters speak, and you already know what their town looks like, and you already drew the map of the world. So it makes sense, especially for sci-fi and fantasy writers, why it's so attractive to write in a series and in trilogies. And then from the reader's perspective, it also makes the same amount of sense because the reader gets accustomed to that world. And once you get drawn into the Harry Potter universe or the Lord of the Rings universe or the Twilight universe or the Star Wars universe, then you get comfortable in that world, or whatever. Think about whatever TV series you're into right now, whatever TV series is your favorite, or whatever you've recently binge watched, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, whatever you're, even if it's a crime show or any show, it doesn't matter. Once you've learned how that world works, then it's easier for you to stay in that world because you like it, it's interesting, you know what to expect, and it's a new, even just to watch a new TV series that you've never watched before takes some amount. You're not even the one who's creating that world. All you're doing is just receiving it, like a reader who picks up the first book in a new fantasy trilogy. You're just receiving the information, but still it's a little bit of work for you because you don't know anything about that world. So there's this steep learning curve in the beginning, just like with all things that we learn and get good at and get accustomed to. It's always harder in the beginning, but once you get over that plateau, the curve, the angle starts to level out a little bit, and then it's easier for you to keep going as a reader or a viewer of that TV series or that whatever that story is. It's easier to keep going because you've already gotten over that learning curve, and now you're in it. Now you're in the universe, and it's fun, and it's easier to stay there than to hop into a new one. Why did I get off on that tangent? Well, I was talking about world building and what a process it is and how easy it is to go down the rabbit hole. And I'm not doing that now. I have done that in the past with other novels and a little bit with this one, but that's the thing about learning with each new novel is this time when I catch myself going down the rabbit hole, I'm able to recognize it just a little bit quicker. So I have done some world building things like that where I'll write pages and pages of notes about the history of Tomorrow City or the weather of Tomorrow City or something mundane like that. But that's not what I'm spending my time on right now. What I'm really working on right now is the outline of the first novel. And my mistake I realize is that I need my characters to pull me through to the ending. And the reason that made so much sense to me is the best novel I've written, which is the last one I did, was called Jamie Ray Demon Hunter. And if you're interested in hearing about those, my first novels that I tried with various degrees of success and failure, you can read the first episodes of this podcast. They're called A Failure Story, and I talk about those in detail. But in this story, Jamie Ray Demon Hunter, the thing that really pulled it through and made it the most cohesive novel that I've ever written is that my protagonist was a young boy, and he had a dream. He had a vision of his dead friend. So my protagonist was a young boy named Jamie Ray, and when he was young with his friend, they were exploring these caves, and his friend fell down a hole and got lost and died and sort of vanished. And so years later, Jamie Ray has a vision of his lost friend, and his friend is asking for help. Anyways, Jamie Ray thinks that his friend is alive. And so as soon as he has that vision, that was what sort of started the story for me. Then I knew that the end of the story would be when he found his friend, or when he discovered whether or not his friend was alive and found the truth of what those visions were about. So knowing exactly what my character wanted was what enabled me to have an idea for my ending, which was what enabled me to have the focus that I needed to pull that story from its inciting incident all the way to its conclusion. And that's the last thing. I know it seems like a huge vital piece to be lacking, but I really built this world because it's a fantasy world, Tomorrow City. I've taken the approach of building this world, and then I've gone through it looks like a funnel of, you have the world building up top, and then as you go narrower and farther down into the funnel, I'm deciding what is the best story to tell. So I'm making decisions about, should I place it in the future or in the past, and who is the best character to tell the story of Tomorrow City. So I've been making all those decisions over the last couple of months, and I've finally narrowed it down into the kind of character, where my character's from, what he's doing, why he's coming to Tomorrow City. And then he's going to be the one to tell us the story of Tomorrow City through his eyes and his experience. But I haven't, and I've got a lot of ideas that I like, but I haven't decided exactly what it is that he wants the most, the biggest reason why he's there. And I know that once I have clarification on that, then I'll be able to pull the story all the way to its end and jump off with the first drafting process. So I'm really excited about that, and I feel like I'm close to being there. I feel like I'm close to having that answer, and it's been a long time since I've been in on that first drafting and just that ultra productive mode of tracking word counts and writing and just attacking the keyboard every morning. So I'm excited to get back to that as soon as I can. I'm also excited to get to the first drafting part of the novel creation, just because, well, for the sake of this podcast, because then I can start to share my progress as I go along, and I can share bits and pieces from the chapters that I write each week, and I can update on my progress, and I can talk about the development, and then I can really tell the story of writing the story. How meta is that? So what I've been doing so far with this podcast, I've been doing it for, well, this is episode number 13. So I took the first few episodes to briefly tell the history of 4 or 5 years from the time where I said I was going to be an author and made that decision and made some life changes to accommodate my dream or my wish to become an author. From the moment I made that decision up until the current point, I told that story. And then really the last 10 episodes have been a lot about my inspiration and my ideas about urban fantasy and epic fantasy and narration techniques like I talked about in the last episode. So I'm still going to always do that stuff because I'll always be reading and having new ideas, and I'll always want to nerd out on stories that I'm interested in at the moment. But once I get into that first drafting process, then I'll be able to offer more specifics and start to build up more hype about my story and start to share more of the specifics and the process as I'm going through. And then also, then I'll get to the point where I have an editor and beta readers, and I can start to craft that first draft. But that's all. I'm getting ahead of myself now. So, but what I'm doing now is I know that I'm coming to the end of that brainstorming and world building and outlining process. And it's not that ever ends. I mean, all the time as you're writing, every draft of the story that you write, you're still always tweaking your outline. And every writer, whether they're a quote unquote pantser or plotter or whatever, whichever terms you use for that dichotomy, some people say, discovery writer versus outliner, whichever side of the spectrum you fall on, if you're extreme on one end or somewhere in between, like most people I imagine are, whoever you are, it's always, I think, this is what I've heard writers and authors who are a lot smarter and more experienced than me say, and it makes sense, that it's always an interchange. It's not like you outline and then you stop and then you write. There's always some discovery that's happening, and there's always some planning that's happening. And those things, some people place those parts of the process at the beginning or at the end, or they go heavy with the outlining earlier or later, or heavy with the discovery at first and then come in with the heavy outlining later. But everyone does it in varying degrees. So it's not like once I start first drafting, I won't be continuing the process of world building. It's just that I'll be much more focused on the creation of the scenes and the specifics, which is the most exciting part. And that's the time when the rubber hits the road. That's the time when you get to see what your story ideas are made of and what your characters are really like. Because I like this analogy I heard the other day from Michael Laron on a YouTube video, which is that it's like an artist when they go to make a painting, is they have a vision of what they want to paint, but obviously it's going to change a little bit as they paint it, and it doesn't look exactly like the concept that you have in your head. You can't just, it's not a literal translation from one to one of what you imagine you're going to make and what you actually make. It always, there's change that happens during the creative process. And so that's what's so fun about first drafting, is that you have a plan going into it. It's like that business saying that no plan survives first contact with implementation or whatever. No plan, what is something like that? No plan can survive the first contact with implementation. It's like no matter what you have in mind, it's going to change as soon as you start implementing it. And that's fun to see, because that's when you give the characters their voices and you let them do what they want. And then, so if you're a good writer, then you do let your characters do what they want. And so that might conflict with what you had outlined or what you wanted them to do, which is awesome. And that's like one of the most joyful things that I've ever felt when I've been writing my novels, is when actually you plan for your characters to do one thing, but as you're in the bunker and you're down there in the mud and you're crawling hand over hand through the scene, you feel you're writing and you sort of intuitively know that, hey, my outline says my character is going to say this, but I know what he just went through, and that's not what he would say. He would say something more like this because of what he just witnessed, and that doesn't jive with everything he's done up until this point. And so you make those changes on the fly, and you make lots of little deviations to the course, and that's when your story starts to really take on its own life. So I'm so excited for that. I'm so excited to share those things, and you will all know exactly when I start that first drafting process, because I'll be sharing a lot, and I'm close. I know that I'm close, and I feel inspired this week because it's my birthday week, and I've got a couple days in a hotel to listen to a lot of music, to read novels, to step away from work at least a little bit mentally for a day, and then hopefully get that edge and that buzz that I need to put a stamp on the outline, or at least say, okay, this is good enough. I'm going to go with it. I like this character. I'm going to write it out and see how it goes. So I'm excited. I feel like I'm getting close. These last 10 episodes, I've been talking about all of my inspirations, and it's been leading up to this. And so I'm excited. That's the theme. I've said it a bunch. And I hope that wherever you are and whatever creative pursuits you're going through right now, I hope that you can find some inspiration, even if it's small, even if it's on a Wednesday morning, even if it's just an hour to yourself as you drive home from work, or whatever moments you can spare, whatever time you can squeeze out of your busy life to just have some peace and think about what it is that's most important to you. I hope that you have good moments like that this week, because we all need them, and those are the things that make life really sweet, I think. And just like when you're listening to a good song, those are the times when you can start to sort of articulate how it is that you really feel and how it is that you really think about this crazy roller coaster of existence that we're all on. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, I love hearing from you, and I love that you are supporting me, and I hope this helps you in some way, struggling creatives out there. I hope that my rambling and inefficient and novice story will help other people out there maybe learn from my mistakes or progress a little bit faster through this process. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful Wednesday. And as always, I will talk next week. I'll be back with maybe some tales from the birthday week and also episode number 14. And 14 is my favorite number, so it's bound to be a good one. Have a good Wednesday, everybody. Until next time, good night.